Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
Coming up on the Payoff, Dan O'Toole rose to stardom in Canada, basically on the Canadian SportsCenter, moved to LA, huge contract with Fox Sports 1, a lot of success on the outside, but when he gets to Los Angeles and he's working for Fox Sports 1, things start to go off the rails a little bit as far as alcoholism is concerned, smoking weed too. Dan is the best. I am a huge fan of his, and I think you'll be a huge fan of this podcast. It was really cool to talk with somebody who walks the walk, somebody who I have known who he was for a while, and that he's just so transparent and authentic. He's got a podcast called Boomsies. You can find it anywhere, and it's really, really good. He's been sober for more than a year. He hit his bottom right after the Super Bowl, after he was let go from TSN, the sports network in Canada. So enough of me. Let's get to my big bro, Kevin Souza, and then we've got Dan O'Toole. Your podcast is awesome, man. It's you in your basement, and you're by yourself, and it's authentic and it's real. And I would encourage anybody. We'll talk a little bit about it, but just off the top, I listened to a bunch of episodes, and it fills a need.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
Yeah,
I think it does.
It's just very authentic, and that's what this is today. For people who don't know, Dan O'Toole and Jay Onright were basically like Dan Patrick and Keith Olbermann for guys of my generation in Canada. So to say you're a big deal is really underselling it. I mean, you guys were, what did you have, 20 years at TSN before you went to Fox?
Yeah, I went there in 2002, and Jay he got there in 2001, and we got paired together in 2004. So that's a pretty long pairing from 2004 up until 2021. We lasted longer than a lot of marriages.
You guys, there was a lot of attention and a lot of heat around you, and that led to the opportunity at Fox, and also led to you basically being lured back to Canada. But I want to get into your whole story. This is about sobriety and recovery, but I'm your key demo here, so I got tons of questions. I want to run the gamut with you because I know your career. I'm interested in it. So you grew up like in a farm country about 90 minutes from Toronto.
That's right. Little town called Peterborough, Ontario. Grew up on a pig farm. We had 1,000 head of pig and 6 horses and 100 acres. So the thing about growing up, and in terms of farm, that's a pretty small farm. But when you grow up in that type of environment, there's never a second when there's not something to do. So when kids get bored nowadays, I just remind my own kids, I'm like, if you grow up on a farm, there's no such thing as boredom, because you say you're bored, you're going to be going to pick stones. You're going to be going to farm. You're going to feed pigs. So you never mentioned the B word growing up on a farm, because that just meant more work.
Do you think you developed a strong work ethic? I work with a woman at the TV station I work at in Texas, and her parents are on a farm outside San Antonio. They run it, and she is like got the most incredible work ethic.
Yeah, that comes with farming. That's instilled in you, because if you don't have a work ethic, then I guess you don't get dinner.
And you grow up on the farm. You go to a grade school, by the way. You're in your class. There's 60 kids. There's 4 people in your class, and you're the only boy.
From grades 1 to 8 in our little school in the country, there were 60 kids, and yeah, I was in my grade had 3 girls and me. And I always tell people, I'm like, the quickest way to go into advanced learning is to be in a grade in which 3 of the other people are advanced learners, and then they realize, well, we can't just leave him behind. So you get lumped in with them.
So you're just an AP. You got an AP tailwind.
Well, what was that slogan? They said, "No kid left behind." That was me. Can't leave him behind. He's got to go with.
What was it like for you as a kid growing up? Because my interpersonal relationships with women before I started to drink, drinking gave me courage, but I didn't have any sisters, so I was kind of like just the whole female thing was foreign. And I'm like you. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. I read you're the youngest of 4. It was just like I didn't have any developed skills with females. How about you growing up?
I don't think any boys had developed skills with girls because we grew up in the day where it was like pulling pigtails and stuff. And now I'm like, well, I never did that. But then you think back to kids that used to do that, and you're like, that was the way. And then teachers say, oh, that's just boys being boys. That's how it was instilled in kids back when we were young was, that's how you interact. Yeah, you just fuck, and that'll show you that you like them. And I'm like, wow, we've come a long way, thank God. But yeah, talking to girls, when do you ever get good at that? I'm still not. I'm 46.
Yeah, I'm 40. I'm 45. I'll let you know. Yeah. Part of this podcast is for anybody to come and kind of either dip their toe in recovery, or if they are looking for a recovery community feel and an outlet, this is a good place for them to check in. You fill out, I guess you check a box maybe of the ultimately like a very, very successful person who was finally threw their hands up and said, I can't do this anymore. And what happened? I want to get into your story, but what happened at the tail end? What triggered Dan O'Toole to say, I'm checking myself into rehab?
So I got laid off or fired, whatever. Supposedly there's a difference. I don't know what it is. Either way, you don't have a job. So I got laid off or fired on a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
And you're working at TSN. You're a huge deal there. And it's a shock that you get laid off.
Yeah, I get laid off, and it's Super Bowl week. And so when my kids got picked up on the regular schedule by their mom, because we have joint custody 50-50 with each parent, works out great. I just put the pedal to the metal, and I started the pity party of all pity parties. And what my friends did was so smart. They just kept showing up in my house. And when you're like many cocktails deep and many joints deep, you're thinking, oh, man, people are coming to party. This is great. But no, they were coming to just keep an eye on me. So they would hang out, then another person would show up, and then went to a buddy's Super Bowl party on a Sunday. And then I was staring at the prospect of, come Monday, I was going to not be going to work. And for someone who had worked nights for 20 years, staring at that prospect of, well, this is not going to end well. And so I compare it to a ski jumper standing at the top of a ski jump. I know how to ski, but if I'm on top of an Olympic ski jump, the odds of me landing that jump are 0.001%. So when I woke up at my buddy's house on that Monday morning and I was staring at that prospect and trying to land that jump, I just called, I actually said to my buddy there, I'm like, I need help. And that's where my friends and family jump into high gear. And I was in a rehab facility the next day.
And that's what that's such a key component, I think, to have. And not everybody has that, right? Like family and friends around you that can turn that key for you. Because I always say, I'm not an expert. All I have is my experience like you. But I've heard experts say the number one thing you can do for somebody if you're trying to help them and they've got an issue with alcohol and drugs and you're worried, that Monday morning when they're broken and they say, I need help, be ready to go. And it sounds like your crew was ready to go.
Oh, yeah. And they were adamant that it was the next day because they knew if it was another day, I would weasel my way out of it and say, no, it's all good. Because when you're out of the fog, you're like, not that bad. I'll make it through this. But they realized, no, this is the perfect opportunity. And the other thing that they did right was no one in those days leading up to it said, yeah, you should dial back on the drinking. You should not do this. Because if you say that to an addict or someone who's on the path to the bottom, if they hear that, they are going to drink twice as much and smoke twice as much, because they're going to give a big F you to the world saying, you can't tell me what to do. So that was another key thing that happened, was no one said anything. They kept their eyes on me, didn't take their eyes off me and watch me every second, but they didn't say a thing. They let me figure it out.
Did they get your parents involved or anything, or your ex-wife? Like, how did that work out?
No, everyone was just, I tell this story. Each person that I called on the phone, like on my way into rehab, from family members to cousins to good friends, each person I called when I said, I'm going to rehab, to a man, they said, good. I was expecting one of them to say, oh, really?
Yeah.
Everyone was like, good.
That's a telltale sign.
That was a shot. No?
When did you, growing up, again, we talked about you were extremely functional. When did when did you have your first drink?
Oh, that would have been probably, thinking now. Well, it would have been when I was pretty young, because I still remember the taste of it. My mom used to drink rum and Coke, and I got to have like the odd little sip off her rum and Coke, and I'm like, and I was like, this is a delicious taste. It's like nothing I've ever tasted before, as opposed to if your first drink's a beer. A beer was my second, and I thought it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever had in my life. And I still never acquired the taste for beer, but man, that first drink of a rum and Coke out of your mom's cup, it's pretty delicious. So that would have been around like 7 or 8.
You say that, by the way, and as me sitting here as an alcoholic, I can taste that. Like, I'm not yearning for it or dying for it, but I know, I could just taste that rum and Coke. Whether it's, and I know exactly what my palate knows what a Captain and Coke is, or what a Bacardi and Coke is. It's interesting how that thing is still fishing around in there.
And as an alcoholic, that's a key ingredient to a big weekend is a rum and Coke, or a spiced rum and Coke during the day, because you need that sugar back in the system.
Mm-hmm.
That was a mainstay. Screwdrivers and spiced rum and Cokes until you got yourself into the evening. Those
were your drinks of choice?
Yeah, it's when you're starting your day.
Yeah.
And then red wine and bourbon at night.
Okay. So when did you start to really drink with consistency, where it starts to ramp up? Because again, I can't emphasize enough.
Oh, I know exactly when.
Okay, go ahead.
It was when I was in LA after my divorce. So my wife and I separated so I moved there in 2013. We would have separated in like 2015. So 2015 on my own in LA, look out. So I was going to Vegas twice a month, flying back to see my kids every 3 weeks. And then I eventually found a girlfriend there. And for the first time, I got a partner where it was no stop sign, and it was a full green light. And I'm not putting any blame on her. She was exactly what I wanted at that time, not saying no to another bottle of wine, instead saying, yeah, let's open a couple more. So right around 2015 is when things went into high gear.
Yeah, that's happened to me before, where if you can find a partner, like if you're dating a woman who likes to drink how you drink, if you were even if your elevator was even going down slowly, and it doesn't always happen on the outside, but like emotionally and physically, you just got on the express because you're looking across from somebody who you find attractive and you like a lot, and they keep going, yeah, one more. And you're okay, why not?
Oh, yeah, you're saying this is the greatest thing ever. You aren't seeing that you guys are catapulting towards disaster because in an addict's mind, you've convinced yourself that, oh, booze is making everything amazing. Booze is the reason we're having fun. And, I was fully invested in that and then moved back to Canada and found we parted ways because the drinking had gotten a bit too much, and with drinking comes arguments. But I found another partner again that it was full green light. The both of us were match made in heaven. And then that just took it to another level when I moved back here in 2017.
Were you with that woman when you checked into rehab, or had you split by then?
We had split by then.
Okay.
So whenever I have my kids, I mentioned a 50-50 schedule. So whenever every second weekend when I don't have my kids, it was just not mayhem, but I would find a party if it was alone in my house, or head downtown Toronto and get a hotel room for the weekend. And it was just, there was always a reason to drink and to smoke, whether I was by myself or not. And yeah, it was a lot.
Oh, now, and when you're in LA, it's pretty intoxicating, not only the alcohol you're talking about, but you were basically one of the headliners of a brand new network, Fox Sports 1. It was yourself, it was Jay Onrait, it was Carissa Thompson, Donovan McNabb. There were a bunch of other big names that they were looking to push ESPN. So you guys get recruited from Canada to Los Angeles, and working for Fox is like, that's a great corporation to work for as far as like financially, and they really take care of you. So that had to be a pretty heady experience.
It was. And the thing that probably added to the full-on green light was no one knew us down there. So I went from going to a bar where you're like, you got to kind of watch what you're doing, to going into a bar and I can fall asleep at the bar and no one's going to know who the hell it is.
Yeah.
So, that was probably not great.
So let's go backwards a little bit. You are working in Vancouver, and you're working at basically like a local sports station there, right?
Yep.
And what happens? How do you end up at TSN?
It was funny. I was doing the local sports in Vancouver when one day I went to get my voicemail. I thought that there was a message waiting on the phone, and it was my boss, my soon-to-be boss from TSN, saying, "Hey, Dan, this is Mark Milliere from TSN. If this is on speakerphone, please take it off. I'd like to talk to you about possibly coming here to work for us," and yada, yada, yada. So that was after 9 months of just getting into TV while in Vancouver. So that's how it started. And they thought I was a brilliant negotiator, because I turned them down 3 or 4 times, because I was living in Vancouver, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. I was dating Miss Molson Indy. I'm like, life doesn't get better than this. And then they finally convinced me. They're like, and then one of my bosses at the station I was working at, they're like, "Dan, they might not call again. And so you might want to take them up on this offer." And luckily I did, because 4 months later, everyone from that station I was working at got laid off. So it was the right decision.
So not only you're good at your job, you're one step ahead of the sheriff, and then you get paired with Jay Onrait, and your career just skyrockets. Yeah,
we never expected that. We got paired together in 2004, and it was a great learning process to get to know each other, and then we really bonded over a show that not a lot of people know about. It's called Tim and Eric Awesome Show, Great Job. 2 comedians, Eric Wareheim and Tim Heidecker.
By the way, Mike, the producer just leaned over and gave me a huge thumbs up, Mike. So that's, he's a Tim and Eric fan.
It is comedy gold. So once we started sharing clips of that, we were like, okay, this is going to work out. And we establish a chemistry over time. And I always go back to one of the things Jay said to me once when we went to break. He said a joke, kind of a funny line, and I said something stupid, like just a stupid comment. And during the break, he's like, if what you're going to say isn't funny or doesn't add to it, don't say anything at all. And a lot of broadcasters would probably take offense, saying, like, how dare that guy tell me? But that always stuck to me, and that's one of the things that made our partnership work so great, was knowing when to shut the F up. And that's like 85% of the time. And we became comfortable with silence, letting the other guy's joke land, not trying to one-up each other, and knowing how to tee each other up. And that's what made the partnership so great, was that chemistry that only comes with working together for 16 or 17 years.
And which, dude, by the way, is difficult to do when, you know, you guys were doing highlights, so a lot of your stuff was ad-libbed and your personalities are shown, but there is a script. So you're kind of bouncing around, and a lot of times people can say stuff and it gets real hokey, you know, like when they shoehorn in a personality or something like that. And the other person's joke doesn't get to laugh, or you laugh at your own jokes.
Oh, we did that. I'm worse than Jimmy Fallon. Laughing at my I readily admit I can't get through a joke most of the times before laughing before the punchline. And I am the worst at that. Well, Jay can deliver a line with deadpan accuracy. And that's what made the partnership work so great, was just like, he is a natural born comedian, and I learned off his comedic timing, and the way we got it down pat was our last 4 years of shows when we came back to Canada in 2017 were hands down our favorite, because you look back at our old stuff and it makes me cringe. It's like an actor looking at some of their first movies and you're like, oh my God, I didn't know how to act. And that's what I was like. I looked at that and I looked to what we were doing from 2017 on, and how we would go to work. Our goal every night was to make each other laugh. But we went to work and we would end up crying, laughing, not being able to speak, that we were laughing that hard. And that's never happened to me in my career. We're laughing so hard, our producer would be in our ear on live TV saying, this is a sports show. You know you're supposed to talk here. Like, it just, and there's nothing greater than having a job, knowing that you can laugh that hard and get paid for it. So, yeah, those last 4 years, I just love. When
you were before you went to Fox and moved to LA, what was the drinking like? Was it very functional when you were working, you know, from 2004?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty standard stuff. I was married at the time, so as most people know, when you're married, you have someone keeping tabs on you, and then if you want to do more drinking, you get to a point where you don't want that. You're like, how dare you tell me? How dare you count my drinks? How dare you tell me I've got to drive to this event so you can have a few drinks? So she kept the reins on it, and I wanted to break the reins. So before LA, if I had drinks, she would definitely, if I had too many, she would let me know. And with any addict, that gets tiresome and constraining in your own mind when you want to break loose. So.
Yeah, I totally relate. We used to, you know, you call a girlfriend or something, or a wife. You're the alcohol accountant. Like, leave me alone. And it's like, I don't know. You know, you do that enough. It's like, wait a minute. So you go to, you get. This is an interesting story. I don't know how you can tell it. How did you guys get discovered? Because I know the guy, Jacob Ullman, and he is an executive at Fox, and you guys are not really even on his radar, and the guy just reads something, right?
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal wrote an article because they had a reporter based in Toronto, and I guess it was a slow news month for the Wall Street Journal, and he wrote an article saying, why can't the American Sports Center be like the Canadian Sports Center? And he didn't write it specifically about the gamut of sports centers that run up here, he wrote it about Jay and I's show. And the guys who are starting a new network, Fox Sports 1 in the States, read that article, Jacob being the guy who read it. And they reached out to us when we were at the 2010 Olympics in London. And that's when we made our first ever contact with them. And they said, yeah, love to have you guys here for the launch of the network. And then they decided to go in a different direction. So we thought, okay, well, that was fun to talk to them. So we didn't think it was ever going to happen. And then 2 or 3 months before launch, they're like, nope, we want to go with you guys. So then negotiations went into high gear, and then we landed there in 2013 for the launch of FS1, which is still going.
FS1 is still going. But it looks a lot different, though. And you guys were supposed to be, just from somebody who follows this stuff, like a SportsCenter. But maybe letting your personality show a little bit, and the promotion was out of this world. If you didn't know,
it was great, but it was too much, too many moving parts. Because you mentioned the people that were on the show, we were all on the same show. It was a 3-hour show a night. So with Chris Thompson hosting, Andy Roddick, Donovan McNabb, Gabe Kapler, who's now the manager of the Giants. We had Ephraim Salam. Did I mention Gary Payton?
Yeah.
It was a treasure trove. And then Jay and I. So I always mention this. I counted one night during a 3-hour live show. They came to Jay and I for a total of, I believe it was 1 minute, 20 seconds.
Wow.
So we would just be sitting in the corner of the studio. And I'm like, what? How is this ever going to work? And eventually people would leave the show, and then by the end of it, for the end of our contract, we were literally in a closet because they're like, well, these guys are still under contract, so let's give them something to do. So we got closer to the show that we did in Canada, but I'll forever look back on that time, grateful for the experience, loving having worked with every single person at Fox. Don't have a single bad word to say about them. I just wish they had let us airdrop our show from Canada into the States and let us just try do that. But like anything in America, when we had one producer here doing our show, we had 30 producers working on one show there, and every producer has a different vision. So that was my one do-over I'd like to do. Just let us do our show here.
Our show.
That we did. Yeah.
What was it like as far as, you're out there, the show was a real big deal. And, you go from, you're starting to just, hey, like, were you looking at Jay and being like, wait, this isn't what we signed up for?
Oh, no. I was living in LA, driving into the Fox studio lot, which is a working movie and TV lot with palm trees, and I could ride my bike to the beach every day. I'm like, this is the greatest.
What did your workload subside?
Sure. People can't find the station, but I never want to live anywhere else. So it was great. But then eventually, yes, once you start thinking beyond where you're living in the palm trees, you're like, oh, we need people watching this show for us to stay here. So it's the reality started to set in after a few months.
Give people a glimpse of what it is like, though, to work like at Fox, the bells and whistles that come with that.
Well, you have a valet service when you pull in, which I'd never seen before. Valet service at work. If you're an on-air person, you have your own dressing room in which you would show up. The suit that you're going to wear that night is hung up in your room with the tie, the shirt, the belt already in the pants, your shoes, your socks, all set out. Reason being, they say, we want you to be able to focus on your job and not have to worry about anything else. So they handled that aspect of it brilliantly. And from in Canada, when you would look out from our desk and see two camera operators, that same scene in LA, you would have 20 people standing in front of you, from 6 crew people to 2 stage handlers to 6 or 7 audio camera people to 2 or 3 audio people. It's just the enormity from American TV to Canadian cannot be overstressed how different it is. It's night and day, the difference. But you also have 330 million people there. We have 38 million. So it's easy to figure out why there's such a discrepancy.
Well, and we also have, hundreds of channels, and you mentioned it. It was tough when Fox Sports 1 came out. People just couldn't find it on their cable packages.
Oh, I know. We at one point were given business cards with the channels for each cable operator on the back of it. So if you showed up at a bar or you were talking to someone and they're like, I don't know where the channel is, you whip that baby out and you give it to the bartender, or you give it to someone you're talking to so they could find it. So they were trying to find, because when you're channel 1,367 on DirecTV, who the hell is going to stumble upon that channel?
Yeah.
It's a daunting task.
We'll get back to this conversation in a second, but right now, a word from our sponsors. Yeah, were the Carissa, was the talent not necessarily pumped about the fact that people couldn't find you guys?
Everyone I was working with, we didn't really talk about it. We're just like, well, we were getting big events, like we'd have some NASCAR races and stuff, and we'd have good lead-ins. We're like, well, maybe people find it now. And then you start thinking, well, ESPN probably didn't have a lot of viewers at the beginning, so you try to convince yourself that, eventually people will find it. So you played those games inside your own head.
What are the games like inside your head now? You're going through a divorce. Your work situation is not what you anticipated, and now the drinking is ramping up.
Oh, I was in a great place, I thought, mentally, because, hey, I get to do whatever the F I want, and I'm living in LA. So in my mind at that time, I'm like, this is what life's all about. So I didn't think about no one finding the channel. I'm like, I've got a contract for 4 years. I'm not going anywhere.
Were there any consequences for you with the drinking?
No, because I never let it interfere with my work. Do that strictly outside of work hours. The only time we ever drank at work was when Nate Diaz came to our show once. And if you look up a YouTube clip of Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor promoting a fight on our channel, and it's one of the most famous interviews, we started poking and prodding, and they went at each other. They were both via satellite, not even in the same room, but it was some great TV. So 2 years later, Nate Diaz walks into our little closet in which we're doing our show, and he's like, oh, it's you guys. And we're like, oh, my God. He's going to beat the crap out of it. He's like, oh, man, that was great. And we had a little cart of alcohol on our set. He's like, let's do some tequila. And we're like, okay, yeah, perfect. So we did tequila shots with them before the interview and after. So, yeah. But, no, as far as it interfering with my work, I made sure that it never crossed the line there.
It sounds
just strictly when I'm done work on a Friday, it's straight to Vegas.
And it sounds like you kind of knew yourself, right? Like you said it. You were at the top of a mountain, and you were like, I can't. I'm going to self-destruct. With idle time is the devil's workshop. At risk of throwing the cliche around, but you saw that. What were those weekends like in Vegas, though? Were they pretty crazy? Was that just like you were up the whole time, or?
Oh, no. Like, I never did any of those, cocaine or anything like that. I would gamble. I would sit at a craps table for 12 hours a day. Like, I would go by myself, and I went to maybe one club when I was there, because people always say, like, oh, Vegas must have been crazy. I'm like, I went to gamble.
Yeah.
Because I just love gambling. So I would get my free drink, gamble all day, go to bed, get up and do it again in the morning, and then go back to LA on Sunday night and hopefully have some money still in my pocket. But I actually did that responsibly too. I'd go with a set amount of money, and if that money was gone, I'd never hit an ATM. So at least I was wise about that part. Wasn't wise about spending every cent each time I went to Vegas.
No, that's pretty wise. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I gotta give you that tip the cap there, because especially when you talk about people with the addict mentality. Was there ever a voice in the back of your head that was like, this is going too far? Like even before you came back to Canada when you were in LA, that was like, this is getting a little out of control?
Probably, but I had a silencer on that voice, I'm sure. Like waking up with a hangover, I'm sure, but I never once did I say, oh, this has got to stop. I had convinced myself, everything's under control. I'm just having a good time. Because in an addict brain, you convince yourself of whatever you want to make yourself to feel happy. So that's what I did. I was full on, nope, everything's good. Everything's under control. No problems at work, no problems in family life. Got a girlfriend. Everything's A-okay.
Is your ex-wife ever like, you gotta get it together? Like,
oh no, she didn't know any of this was going on. But she knew I was going to Vegas and questioned why I was going there so often. But in her mind, I probably had a wife there or something, which I didn't. I didn't even speak to any women there. I was so focused on gambling. I'm the only guy who went to Vegas and never attempted to have a conversation with someone in hopes of spending the night with them. I was that focused on gambling.
Do you still gamble now?
Well, I work for a gambling website, Bet River.
Right, Bet River sponsors your Boomsies, yeah. So I guess so.
Yeah, I play around on their site, and I put $5 on the Raptors to win their series. But the only time I wouldn't say my gambling is out of control. That proximity to Vegas just let me fall in love with craps even more than I loved it. And I don't like playing online craps. I like doing it in person. So I just do it now when I'm in Vegas, which I was in December. Met some buddies there and had some meetings and stuff with employers. And yeah, I went in with the same thing. Went with a set amount, never hit the ATM, and doing it stone cold sober was the greatest. As I told my buddy who lives in Vegas, waking up sober in Vegas, put that in my veins. Because you see everyone walking around the day after, it doesn't matter what day of the week is, and they're red-faced, and they're dealing with a hangover. They're dealing with their losses at the table the night before, and I got to bounce to my step. I'm meeting my buddy for breakfast, and I'm like, this is amazing. So that was a great new experience going back to Vegas for the first time since finding sobriety.
So when you do find sobriety, when you're in that rehab for 23 days, what happens inside that recovery bubble for you that makes you think this is something I want to stick to? And you really start to. You've talked about this. I've read it. You really started to work on yourself, to peel back the layers.
Yeah. Yes, my favorite part, and I like to stress this too, is people probably say, oh, I can't go to rehab. You don't need to go to rehab. It's just what I needed at that time. The recovery community is amazing. Just admitting that you have a problem and you need to fix that problem, that is the biggest step you'll ever have to take. But while in rehab, my favorite part was journaling and reading those journals out. And I'm a crier. Even before
you cried on your first podcast.
Now, yes. So reading those journals in my group when you're given a topic like describe your perfect day drinking, and then describe your perfect day while sober day that you envision to have. So just reading those out loud, and my perfect day has actually come true multiple times, and I wrote about it in the rehab facility where I said, I just want a day. Actually, I wrote it very eloquently. I said, it's a Tuesday morning, just a regular Tuesday morning, nothing special on this day. a smell of coffee permeates the house. The toast is popping. There's the mad rush of kids walking around the house, getting ready for school. And then I'm about to cry talking about this. I'm like, and I end it with, there's nothing special about this day. It's simply the weary traveler is not weary anymore. So it was the most normal, benign day that I described, but when you're in active addiction, that is something you don't even envision, because you're like, it's just chaos at all times, just trying to control the chaos. So just having the most normal of normal days was something to behold when it happened the first time. And I was able to text my therapist the first day that happened. And she's like, I just bawled reading that, Dan, because I remember that journal you wrote. So just finding so much joy in the normalcy of life that didn't seem attainable before, or something that was even on the radar before.
And you do the things like therapy, you do the things like journaling. For me, that puts the wind in my sails, where a regular day like you just described, you find gratitude in it, and there's a level of excitement in that. Like you said, put it into my veins, like, and all of a sudden you're like, here's what I've been chasing for me, right? Here's what I've been chasing, and it's right there in front of me with my daughters and my day-to-day.
That's right. Yeah, because when you're using and drinking, you don't realize. Well, eventually, that's what. When I said I need help, I just wanted the chaos to stop. The chaos in your head, like, oh, when am I going to have this next drink? Oh, I got to hide this. I gotta do this. I just want it to stop. That's what I wanted when I said I need help. So now that train has stopped, and as I pointed out on my podcast, is there's still bumps in the road. Of course, you're going to have crappy things happen, but they don't derail your day now. When in addiction, if you got a bad email or someone told you something, you would hang on to that, and even more reason to drink. Now you deal with the problem, you get on with your day, and it doesn't derail your entire day, your entire week. And that has made all the difference in the world, is just getting rid of that chaos and finding joy in every single thing in my day. Like I walk around like a crazy person, just smiling, walking down the street, and I love it.
Well, you've got an incredible attitude, and you probably, I would imagine you probably did when you were drinking a little bit before, and then it gets out of control, and we're just not the people who God or whoever, right, intended us to be. There's one thing I got to ask you about. When you came back on my radar, sitting in America, I'm reading the New York Post years ago, and I don't know how much you can comment on this, but it says, Dan O'Toole sent out tweets that his daughter wasn't safe, and it just created this huge storm. And can you comment on that? What exactly happened, and how have you worked through that?
I commented on that on a previous podcast, and I don't really talk about it now. It's something that happened, and something that I, in the moment, should have handled completely different. But I was in a headspace where I said, this is my cry for help for the situation I was going through. So I'll leave it at that. And
you were desperate. So you had like a desperate feeling.
Yes. I had, as my psychologist at that time described it, a catastrophic life event. So if that's not really in the textbook of life when you're born, how to deal with one of those. But yeah.
No, it's not.
So
and,
yeah.
Do you find yourself able, and what exactly in your recovery today? What are you doing to keep the fire burning and to keep, you listen? If I listen to your podcast, if people do, you get a real good vibe from the authenticity and how you put yourself out there. Again, I mean, I knew you as the highlight guy from Canada. That was a big deal at Fox Sports 1. And literally 2015, not even in your first podcast, you're crying, talking about, it's a genuine cry, right? About riding a bike, basically, and how that's like life. How have you found that gear in sobriety?
By just sticking, I shouldn't say sticking to it, but just believing in the process that I've gone through. I always point back to something a buddy of mine said on the way to rehab, where I was on the phone with a friend, and I'm like, I'm never going to have fun again, because as addicts, we all convince ourselves the only reason you're having fun is with booze and alcohol, when that's not the case at all. So I said that to my buddy. I'm like, I'm never going to have fun again. And he's like, Dan, you're about to live life for the first time. You're going to have the most fun, and you're going to be the happiest you're ever going to be in your life. And he convinced me. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll believe you, whatever. And then I went in. And then once I was out of that place and started to discover that on my own, it's not like a eureka moment. It just starts to happen where you're like, oh my God, why did I convince myself that viewing people with an outside lens, when you go to a party and they get obliterated and whatever, and you look at it and you say, what? Why did I think this was making me happy? And I don't judge these people. I know why people still drink and use, because they want to turn their brains off. It gets rid of their problems for a night. And I can totally understand that. And I still love all my friends, even though they still do all that. And I still get invited to their events. But it's just, when you view it with a different lens and not with a clouded lens of an addict, it's just, life becomes a lot simpler and a lot more joyful. So that's, those accumulated moments is what powers me through, because when you hit a little speed bump, the speed bump's only going to last for a second, as opposed to, oh my God, I got to deal with this for how long? Okay, Dan, we're all good. Even my daughter say that to me now. We were playing Super Mario the other night, and something was happening, and now they know. They're like, Dad, it's all good. It's all good. I'm like, you're right. So they know I'm in a headspace now where they can say, Dad, take a breath, and nothing's going to happen. And it's just being surrounded by people and being in a headspace where you can tell yourself that, and okay, we're good. Let's continue on with life, and let's find the next joyful moment.
But this, and also too, the sunshine coming off you is starting to affect the people around you, like your daughters, and they're more understanding of how to navigate these difficult moments and these puddles on the ground.
That's right. That's what I'm hoping, is just that they look at what the work I put in and the benefits of that work, even though they won't openly say it. Like, we went to a party, my middle daughter and I, and we left the party, and she turned to me and she said, man, those people were really drunk in there. And I knew, looking at her, oh man, I hope I don't cry again. But looking at her, she was thinking in her head, without even thinking it, I'm so proud of my dad right now, that he's not one of those people.
And those are the moments you wouldn't even think to journal about, because that's almost too good. You're just trying to journal about a regular day. Yeah.
So just seeing, and she just had a bounce her step coming out of that party. So did I. And I'm like, this is what it's all about.
A couple more things before I let you out of here, because I know you got a busy life. When you go into treatment, and you're a huge deal in Canada, what was that like? You're in treatment, and you're owning it. You're owning this thing. Like, you basically couldn't have played the hand better, really. I mean, nobody wants to go check into rehab, right? But you went right away. You didn't give yourself any time, and you're in there owning it. How do you own it when you come out of there?
Oh, that was not the case at all. When I went in, I'm like, no one's ever going to hear about this.
Oh, okay.
This is going to stay between friends and family and I. And then once I was out of that place and I didn't even know what I was going to be doing. I didn't know I'd be doing a podcast, but once I was in the recovery community and talking to other people and discussing it, saying like, well, should I talk about this? And then they're like, yeah, you could help people, but you don't have to, only if you're comfortable. And then once I got deeper, I'm like, I can help people. And I got an email 2 podcasts ago in which the guy said, I know people say I'm telling my story in hopes of helping one person. And then his next line was, well, Dan, I'm happy to say I'm your one person. And I'm like, oh my God, that's where I cried again. So that email there alone, I said, if I don't do another episode of this podcast, this has been one of the greatest projects I've ever done in my life because of that one email. But it hasn't just been that one. It's been direct messages and phone calls and texts from people that I've never met, and people saying I'm entering rehab next week. I'm scared, and actually spending the time and talking with these people. And yeah, I've taken full ownership, knowing that the chances of helping people are pretty great. Even just that one person, which one person turns into a couple, turns into a handful, and then yeah, it grows into what it has now. So it has been a great experience, something that I didn't even expect to happen or dive into, that I just dive into with open arms. I wouldn't dive with open arms. I dive into it with a diving pose. If I dove with open arms, that'd be a belly flop.
We don't want that. Well, I got a message from a buddy of mine who's sober about what you were up to, and I was like, oh my gosh, and it was such a jolt for me, and I think that's probably what you're looking to accomplish and are accomplishing, is that like you're helping out people aside from being entertaining and compelling, but you're also helping out people being out there, kind of smashing that stigma. And it's like, oh man, like Dan O'Toole's sober. Like, this is like, wow, he's a cool guy I can relate to. That's one more of the tribe that kind of keeps me going.
And then, yeah, kind of unrelated, but kind of related. I just wanted to point to an incident that happened, not an incident, a moment that happened in my kitchen yesterday where I'm making breakfast, and I started dancing with my daughter, and she was embarrassed. And I'm like, in sobriety, you can have those moments with the 100% understanding that you are sober, and you don't look back at it and say, oh, I was acting foolish with my kids because I had a few drinks in me. I realized I've always acted like an idiot, and now I can do it with a clear conscience because my kids aren't going to say, oh, he's got a few drinks in him. They know, no, Dad's stone cold sober. He's just an idiot. So it's an amazing feeling, and it's so liberating, not walking around with the back in your head saying, oh, gotta hide that I smoked that joint. Oh, gotta get some mouthwash because I had that drink. No, just be an idiot. Because I'm an idiot. So it's great.
Compare that feeling you just described along with the feeling you get from people that are direct messaging you, telling you you're helping them, and that feeling you got being like a superstar or a star, on billboards in LA.
Oh, there's the current feeling outweighs the other one by 1,000,000%, because I've said this before, maybe at some point early in my career that I liked being on TV or felt, no, this is my job. I need to have it. But we were walking downtown Toronto, my daughters and I, the other day, and my daughter says, Dad, you just went by on a streetcar. I'm like, what are you talking about? So we ran up, and there was a whole streetcar with my face on it, with the Bet Rivers company, and it's all over. Like, there's like 5-7 foot heads of me on the streetcar. Where in the past, I would be sending that on social media, and I'm like, but now, like, for my kids and I, we're like, yeah, whatever. That's just Dad's job, and it's not like, hey, look at me. The current feeling of people reaching out, that's where I'm like, okay, that means 100% more than my face all over a streetcar could ever mean to me.
Last question. When somebody comes into recovery and they just want to stop, and they ask you, or they send you a direct message, Dan, what do I do? What do you say to the person who's just struggling to get one day?
You congratulate yourself by saying, first off, I have a problem. And do you know how many people don't have the balls to say that? You can't count that high. because you've taken the first massive step saying, I have a problem and I want the chaos to stop. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's what I was. And one day grows into 2, grows into 3 weeks, grows into 3 years. But guess what? We're all counting days. Every single one of us in sobriety. You just got to be sober for today. And the great thing about it is it becomes human nature after a while. Like, sure, you'll have cravings like, oh, man, I'm walking by that guy smoking a joint. I sure would like some of that. But now I've gotten to the point, I'm always going to be an addict. And there's always going to be a drink right around the corner, a joint around the corner. But it doesn't even enter my brain when I walk through a lobby with my kids at a hotel where the bar's rocking. It doesn't enter my brain saying, oh, I hope I can sneak away to get a drink there for an hour. You actually start to formulate in your brain saying, I actually used to think that. Oh, man. No, I'm glad I don't have to have that clogging my brain now, and I can just focus on life and being in the present. And it all just adds up. It's just, for today, you're not going to have a drink. I'm not going to have a smoke. And for tomorrow, we'll deal with that when we get there. But let's just focus on today. And that's pretty much how I live every single day now. Just focus on today, being happy, being present.
Well, you were certainly present here today, man. The podcast is Boomsies. Dan O'Toole, you are the man. I really appreciate your time today. I cannot thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great. You made me cry 2 or 3 times. Thanks a lot.
You got it, man. I'll send you this link. It'll go up next Tuesday. I really can't thank you enough, man.
Oh, well, you're awesome. Thanks for having me on. And, yeah, send me that link when you get it.
All right, Dan. Thanks, man. Take care.
Okay. Talk to you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much for listening to The Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And, of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And, of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media podcast.